Have you ever felt like life dealt you a low blow? Like the ground vanished beneath your feet? I know the feeling. My name is Anna, and 6 years ago my life fell apart. My marriage, my safe haven, turned to dust overnight. And amidst all the pain, he left me with the one thing he thought would forever shackle me to defeat: an old, beat-up car. A piece of junk that barely ran. He thought he'd bring me to my knees, with no future, leaving me no option but to live a miserable, dreamless life. I ask you, have you ever felt humiliated, belittled, or like someone discarded you as if you were worthless? I felt that way too. But what if I told you that the biggest betrayal of my life became my greatest blessing? That old, smelly car, which seemed like a burden, was the fuel that led me to shine? It wasn't easy. There were days of despair, tears, and the urge to give up. But I learned a secret. That car, the symbol of my defeat, became the key to my freedom. A freedom that made me discover talents I didn't even know I had. And today I'm here, with a story that can change your life. What he did hurt me, but what I did afterward made him regret it. You'll discover how revenge isn't the best path, but success is. The story of how I turned the junk he gave me into a treasure. And how he, 6 years later, saw me on TV and realized what he had lost. If you're going through a tough time, feeling hopeless, get ready. Because this story isn't about defeat, it's about how the biggest fall of your life can be the springboard to success. The day he left was like any other. The sun was shining, the coffee was hot, and the silence was the only thing out of place. Marcos, my husband, was a man of few words but intense gaze. In those 10 years of marriage, I had grown accustomed to his discretion, and I even loved it. He was the rock I leaned on, the anchor that kept me steady. I was a stay-at-home wife, and he, the family's provider. He always encouraged me to drop everything to take care of our home and myself. He used to say I was my own work. In my innocence, I found that romantic. We lived a comfortable life. We weren't rich, but we had enough not to worry. I dedicated myself entirely to our home, to him, and to the few activities I had. I had a small sewing studio that I kept as a hobby. It was my refuge, the place where I created and dreamed. He encouraged me, but also reminded me that our home was my true job. On the day of farewell, he got up, had breakfast, and left for work as usual. But something was different. He didn't give me a goodbye kiss. He didn't say I love you. He simply walked out the door. I thought he was just stressed with work and didn't give it much importance. Hours passed, and he didn't come back. Night fell, and I started to get worried. I called his cell phone, but it was off. I called his work, and they told me he hadn't shown up. Panic began to set in. My world, which was so solid, began to shake. I spent the night awake, waiting, praying. And when the sun rose, I saw a scene I will never forget. His car, a luxury model he loved, wasn't in the garage. In its place was an old, rusty car, with dented bodywork and a failing engine. Inside that car, on the passenger seat, I found an envelope. Inside there was a piece of paper. It was the divorce papers. I broke down. My world, which was so solid, crumbled into a million pieces. I cried, I screamed, I threw a tantrum. I couldn't understand. What did I do wrong? Where did I go wrong? The only thing he left me was that old car, barely running, and a cold divorce letter. And I, who thought my world was so secure, was alone. That car became a symbol of everything I had lost: my husband, my home, my security, and my dignity. But amidst all the pain, I began to feel something different. Anger. An anger I had never felt before. That old car wasn't just a car. It was the humiliation, the disrespect, the proof that he saw me as trash, something he could simply discard. And at that moment, I made a decision. That car, which he thought would tie me to defeat, would be my springboard to success. The first step was the hardest. I had no money. I had no job. I had nothing but my anger and that old car. I started to think, what could I do? I had no professional experience, and the only thing I knew was sewing. I decided I would use my studio as my means of survival. But how could I get to clients without a functioning car? I remembered a phrase my grandmother used to say: if life gives you lemons, make lemonade. And my lemon was an old car. I started to study. I researched automotive mechanics online, on how to fix an old car. I spent hours and hours in the garage, with the hood open, trying to understand what was wrong. I didn't have professional tools, so I used the few I had at home. Hammers, screwdrivers, and even kitchen pliers. Every day, I learned something new. I learned to change the oil, to fix the carburetor, to understand the electrical system. The car, which was once the symbol of my humiliation, became my project, my therapy, my engine for hope. After months of hard work, I succeeded. The car's engine, which seemed to have a mind of its own, finally made a soft, steady sound. It was my first victory, and the feeling of victory gave me more strength. I realized that my life wasn't over. In fact, it was just beginning. I used the car to go to clients. I transformed the back seat into a showroom of fabrics and samples. I started making clothes for neighbors, for friends of friends. And my work, which was once just a hobby, began to turn into a business. My old car, which was proof of my defeat, became my work tool. People saw me in the car, covered in grease, with my sewing clothes, and praised me. They saw my determination, my effort, my courage. And that gave me even more strength. That car taught me to be independent, not to depend on anyone, to believe in myself, and to use my own hands to build my future. I was no longer looking for a husband, a savior. I was my own savior, my own hero. Over time, my work began to be recognized. My clothes, which were once simple, became true works of art. I mixed fabrics, created embroideries, and used my creativity to create unique and special pieces. I became known as the seamstress who drives an old car. And my story spread throughout the city. I started receiving orders from clients in other cities, in other regions. My business grew, and I was able to hire people to help me. I transformed my studio into a small business, with a team of seamstresses and designers. Revenge was no longer my motivation. My goal was simply to be successful. I wanted to show him, and the world, that I wasn't trash, that I was worth more than he gave me, and that I could build a life on my own. One day, a journalist came to interview me. She had heard my story, about the old car, and about how I had transformed my life. She was fascinated. My story, which was the story of a humiliated woman, became the story of a strong woman who overcame adversity. The report went on TV, and I, who was once the housewife who depended on her husband, became a public figure. My work became known throughout the country. My clothes were worn by artists and celebrities. And my name, Anna, became synonymous with overcoming. I, who once felt humiliated, was now the star. That old car, which was the symbol of my defeat, became proof that life can give us the worst lemons, but we can make the best lemonade. And that's how revenge arrived. It wasn't a revenge of hatred, but a revenge of success. He who abandoned me, left me with nothing, now saw me on TV, shining. He saw me in the newspaper, in magazines. He saw his name, Marcos, being associated with my success. He regretted it. I know that. I received messages from him, calls, emails. He tried to get closer, to apologize. But I didn't respond. My revenge wasn't about him. It was about me. About my story, about my victory. One day, I was driving my old car, going to my studio. I decided to keep the car. It was part of my story. It reminded me of where I came from, of everything I had overcome. It was proof that life gives us the worst blows, but we can get up and keep fighting. In the middle of traffic, I saw a luxury car stopped, with the hood open. The driver was trying to start the car, but the engine wasn't working. It was a tall man, in an expensive suit and a tired face. I approached to help, and to my surprise it was Marcos. My heart stopped for a second. He saw me and was shocked. He was no longer the man I knew. He was thin, with an aged face. He looked at me, and I saw regret in his eyes. He told me what had happened. He had left our life for a woman he thought was his true love. But the woman left him and took everything he had. He lost his job, his house, his car, everything. And now he was alone with nothing. He looked at me, at my old car, and at my smile. He apologized, told me he regretted abandoning me. He told me he loved me and wanted to come back. My heart, which was once his, felt nothing anymore. I looked at him, and I saw my 6-year sago self. I saw the despair, the humiliation, the hopelessness. I didn't forgive him. Not because I no longer loved him, but because I didn't need his forgiveness. I had already forgiven myself. I had already moved on. I didn't need him anymore. I left him there, alone, with the broken luxury car. I started my old car, and I drove away. I didn't need revenge. My success, my victory, was already the greatest revenge I could have. After all my story, my life was no longer the same. I was a successful businesswoman, a public figure, and a strong, independent woman. But my life wasn't just work. I learned to love and to be loved in a different way. I met a wonderful man who loved me for who I was, not for what I had. I got married and had a daughter. I became a mother, and my life was complete. I didn't forget where I came from. I kept my old car. It was proof that life can give us the worst blows, but we can get up and keep fighting. And it was proof that the greatest wealth is not money, but our story, our courage, our strength. I used my story to help other women. I created a social project where I teach sewing and entrepreneurship to women in vulnerable situations. I help them find their strength, their courage, their independence. I help them transform their story into a story of victory. That old car, which was the symbol of my defeat, became my inspiration. It taught me that life is not about what we have, but about what we do with what we have. It taught me that we can turn the junk life gives us into treasure. I look back at that day he left me, and I no longer feel anger. I feel gratitude. Gratitude for him giving me the worst blow of my life. Because if he hadn't given me that blow, I would never have discovered my strength. I would never have discovered my true self. 6 years after he left me, I was at the peak of my success. I was one of the most successful women in my country. I was an inspiration to millions of women. I was proof that life can give us the worst blows, but we can get up and keep fighting. I was on a TV show talking about my story, about my success. And the host asked me, what would you say to your ex-husband if he were watching you now? I looked at the camera, and I smiled. I felt no hatred, anger, or resentment. I felt compassion. I knew he was watching me. I knew he regretted it. I knew he was suffering. I said I am grateful. I am grateful for him leaving me. I am grateful for him giving me that old car. Because if he hadn't done that, I would never have discovered my strength. I would never have become the woman I am today. My success is not about revenge. It's about overcoming. It's about my story. It's about my victory. That old car, which he gave me as a symbol of humiliation, became my symbol of victory. That car, which he thought would tie me to defeat, freed me. It freed me from fear, insecurity, dependence. And the lesson I learned, and that I want you to learn, is that life can give us the worst blows, but we can get up and keep fighting. Our story is not about what we lose, but about what we gain. And we can gain much more than we lose. We can turn our pain into strength. We can turn our humiliation into dignity. We can turn our defeat into victory. And that's how I, who was once a humiliated housewife, became a successful woman, an inspiration to millions. And he, who left me with an old car, saw me on TV and regretted it. Life is a cycle, and we can choose whether we're going to be at the top or at the bottom. And I chose to be at the top. What about you? What will you choose? Anna's story isn't just about a woman who overcame a divorce. It's living proof that life doesn't define you by the blows you receive, but by how you react to them. What was supposed to be your end can be your beginning. The junk they gave you can be the fuel for your journey. Now I ask you, what is the old car in your life? What is the symbol of humiliation, the pain, or the problem that prevents you from moving forward? Is it a frustrating job? A relationship that traps you? A disappointment that left you devastated? It's not about waiting for a miracle. True transformation begins when you, like Anna, decide to pick up the screwdriver and start fixing your own engine. Pain can be your toughest teacher. Failure, your most valuable lesson. Others' regret, proof that your success is your greatest victory. If you're feeling hopeless, remember Anna's story was built by every small action. Every screw tightened on the car, every stitch sewn by hand, every tear that turned into a smile. Your journey is also made of small steps. If this story touched you and inspired you to take the first step, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. We want to accompany you on this journey. Together, we can turn your old car into the greatest victory of your life.